Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, How to Successfully Deliver Virtual Financial Education Workshops, hosted by Prosper Canada. We're very happy to get started today. I see a few more of you are just coming in, so please have yourself a comfortable seat, a cool or hot beverage, and we hope that you enjoy spending the next hour with us. Before we begin our presentation, we'd like to make sure that we review logistics with you. Everyone attending has been put on mute for this webinar so that we can ensure audio clarity, but we would like to hear from you as you have questions. So if you're able to locate the question box in the control panel at the side of your screen, you can input questions at any time, and we'll make sure to have a look at those during our Q&A time at the end of the session. Also in the control panel, you'll find a section with handouts. So we have two included in there today, which you can download and refer to at any time. And we'll also be sending out the handouts as well as a copy of the webinar slides and a video recording of the session afterwards. So that will be coming to your inbox within a couple of days. So you can watch again or share with colleagues or friends. We would like to acknowledge that we are joining you today from Toronto, which is situated upon traditional territories. These territories include the Wendat, Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nations, and the Métis Nation. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have this opportunity to work in the community on this territory. We acknowledge and thank everyone on the line joining us from traditional territories across Turtle Island. We're honored to be having this meeting with you, and we thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are bringing this to you from Prosper Canada. We are a national charity dedicated to expanding economic opportunity for Canadians living in poverty through program and policy innovation. The Prosper Canada Centre for Financial Literacy works with government, business, and community all across Canada to improve the financial knowledge and well-being of vulnerable Canadians, to expand their access to quality financial information, education, and counselling as is relevant to them. Our programming in this area is part of the work of the Centre, which is co-founded and supported by TD Bank Group. We are so excited to introduce our panel to you today. We have two guest speakers from across Canada who are going to be sharing with you their wonderful basket of tips and tricks and learned experiences from delivering financial education virtually. So we'd like to welcome Fatima Esmail, who is a financial empowerment facilitator with Momentum in Calgary, and Millie Acuna, who is Manager of Asset Building Programs with Seed Winnipeg in Manitoba. Welcome, Fatima and Millie. We're so glad to have you with us today. And I am Glenna Harris. I am Manager of Learning and Training here at Prosper Canada, and we will love to get started. A short introduction for everyone today for what our agenda will look like. We're going to spend a little bit of time getting to know you briefly through some polls and briefly touch on some broad considerations for virtual workshops. And then we're going to get right to our speakers and hear what they have to say. So Fatima will take us through some of her best tips for organizing virtual sessions, for designing learning and thinking about adult learning principles. And Millie is going to share likewise some of the outreach practices and engagement tips that she has learned over the last few months in delivering virtual education sessions. And then we will have time for Q&A. So we hope to hold the last 10 to 15 minutes or so for questions. So again, we hope you'll share those questions with us as you have them. So before we get started, we'd love to hear a little bit more about you so that we can help our speakers know a little bit more about your context today for this topic. So if you'd like to let us know your own experience so far with delivering virtual workshops. Have you done this already for a while now? Have you done it maybe but only a little bit, just once or twice? Have you not started this yet, but you know you'd like to start soon? Or you haven't done any virtual workshops at all? So I'll leave this up for about 30 more seconds. All right, so I'll close it in 10 seconds. And 5. And 1. So we can see the results there on the screen. More than half of you have already been delivering virtual workshops of some kind, so that's great. So as we have about 200 of you listening in today, that means over 100 of you are already doing this work, and that's fantastic. And so for the other sort of 4/10 of those listening in, we're so excited to share more tips with you. We hope that what we share today will resonate with you, and you should be able to take some of this right away and start applying it in your work. And one more poll that we'd like to offer you. We're asking you to pick one answer, so it's a bit like, you know, choosing your favorite child a little bit here. But if you were to pick one of the following that you are most curious to learn about today, would that be more about how to work on outreach before workshops, more on how to organize events and manage the attendees, more on how to engage learners virtually, more on how to develop learning activities virtually, or another one that you'd like to share with us in the question box? So I'll leave this up for 15 more seconds. All right, I'll close it in 3, 2, and 1. All right, so we've got a very strong consensus here. It looks like you're most curious to know more about ideas on how to engage learners and how to develop activities. So Fatima and Millie, we're extra excited to hear what you have to say, and I know that that's going to be very relevant to what you're talking about. So thank you everyone for telling us a little bit more about your point of view on this topic. Millie and Fatima are going to be sharing a lot of great tips today. And there's a lot that we could potentially cover. And we're going to try to do as much as possible as we can in this hour. But we also want to encourage everyone that, you know, the important thing is to make sure that your workshop design meets your own needs in your community and in your program. So it's always a good idea to check how you're addressing adult learning principles, for example, thinking about different styles, thinking about how you're encouraging people to apply their learning and so forth. Always think about your audience. So for example, what's their age? What's their experience with technology already? Are there going to be people talking to you in multiple languages? Is there a time that would make most sense, for example? You can be thinking about your program delivery needs. So for example, our speakers today will also touch on the trials and tribulations of paperwork and evaluation, and that's something to consider as well, what your own needs are there, or is there priority content that you need to deliver. Technology is always a hot topic, and as we are all embracing this remote moment, this remote work moment, this remote learning moment, there's so many platforms available, and we want to encourage you to make that choice that's right for your program. So today we will not be endorsing any one particular platform over another. We want to make sure that that's within your own needs and your own costs, and You're going to hear some examples from our speakers about what works for them, and we similarly encourage you to see what works for you. And finally, always consider the resources you have available to do your delivery. You know, do you have time to do a workshop every week, every month? Is it an hour? Is it 2 hours? Is it 15 minutes? All these things are within your power, and we want to encourage you to take those considerations when you're delivering your materials. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to our first presenter, Fatima Esmail, and she is going to share with us some of her wonderful experiences working at Momentum and delivering financial education. So I am going to give her presenter control, and she's going to take it away. So welcome, Fatima.
Hi, thank you, Glenna, for having me present today. I'm super excited to tell you all my sort of techniques that I've used and what's worked and not for me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you.
Okay, so I'm going to cover. Sorry.
Are you able to share your screen, Fatima? Sorry. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Is it loaded? Yeah. Okay.
It's loaded.
Right.
We can just see your notes panel though. Are you able to make it full screen?
Sorry, give me 1 second.
No worries.
You're not seeing the full screen. Okay, let me just do this. No. It's on.
Yeah, maybe it's in the display settings there. Yeah.
Yeah,
there we go. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, the joys of technical difficulties, always a reality, right?
Well, I'll for sure cover that during my presentation.
Take it away.
A little activity there.
Sorry, Fatima, we can see your GoToWebinar control panel. Could you minimize that as well? Thank you.
Sure.
Perfect.
Is that better?
That's great.
Okay, so I'm covering virtual workshops, online delivery, and the best practices. These are the techniques I've used in the office. Some of the other financial empowerment facilitators at Momentum have also been using these techniques, and they've worked well. So it's kind of tried and tested since we went home during the pandemic and tested all of these new technologies out. Momentum is currently working on an online learning strategy for the whole organization, which is being developed at the moment. So this is kind of our interim solution. So for today's presentation, I'm going to walk you through everything in 3 stages. The first is the logistical prep that I do. The second, the learning design components. And the third, and not least important, is paperwork components of it. And so this is actually a great example of what I do. So I'll display this title page for everyone that comes into my workshop. The learners then know that this is the workshop to be expected. So they know that this is the organization, this is the actual workshop, and that we will be starting shortly. So it reduces some anxiety to think that they might be in the right virtual workshop or not. The other thing I also recommend is welcoming participants to the workshop. So just as I would do in a real life workshop, I would stand by this door and say, hello, how are you doing? That kind of thing. As they register and log in and put their name in or whatever they want to be called, I usually say, hello, Judy, or hello, Salma, or whatever their name might be. And so if you can do that, that is highly recommended. Oh. So that's kind of my welcome and kind of friendly reminder to everyone. It's also about creating a great virtual environment. Just like you create a open and approachable classroom environment, you're setting that virtual environment. The other thing is to preload any websites or any websites that you might need. So in the browser, so for example, I will usually have it open, the tabs, and so that way it's already done for me. I also like to, if I know the VPN is slow and when I'm connecting to a video call, I don't want that to interfere with my video call, I'll generally disconnect from my VPN. and actually focus on my video call. So when I'm hosting a seminar like this, I don't want to be connected to my VPN because I already know I have some issues with that and the internet bandwidth. So I kind of know the nuances of technology. So I really encourage you to experiment with that and know that before you're actually on your final video call. So have a test run with a workmate of yours or a colleague before you actually get into it, so you're kind of aware of all those issues. This is an example of how I would set up my screens at home. I personally like to have 2 to 3 screens in front of me. This is not exactly the picture of my desk, but anyways, the idea is to have my slide deck on one, my talking notes on another, and the third idea is to have those resources or those tabs that I've pulled up to show learners later on the third screen. So that just helps me organize my presentation.
It's so tidy, Fatima. So tidy.
I wish my desk was tidy, huh? So technical difficulties are inevitable. As everybody saw, I was working from the office right now, and so I was using a meeting room and a little bit unfamiliar with that. So even Dark Vader has these technical difficulties for other geeks like me. And so it's just important to ask for forgiveness before permission. So right when I start a session, I let learners know that, you know what, if I have technical difficulties, please forgive me, and just bear with me and we'll figure it out together. We're all still learning. Even though I've delivered several workshops online, I always have something new about technology to learn. So I just learn as I go. And then I also set about a protocol. So if I'm disconnected from the workshop or the session, what happens next? I want the learners to stay on board, and I will try and reconnect as soon as possible. So that's kind of setting up the next steps of what happens. I also still call myself a technology newbie, even though I've been doing this since about March, I guess, because I always have something new to learn about technology, and technology always knows more about itself than I do. So it's just one of those things. And so I'm just asking for forgiveness and the idea that, you know what, if things go wrong, that my learners just stay with me and are flexible, right? This is a great little slide I like to use in workshop just to set out the housekeeping stuff. So I would usually in the workshop, I would say, where the bathrooms are, how long the workshop's going to work. But this also includes online etiquette, just in terms of if somebody on the session has not joined a online session before or something like that. So just the start and end of the workshop. I believe in breaks every 50 minutes of delivery. I set up a timer on my phone, and it's an audible timer. So every 50 minutes it'll go off, and the learners and myself will hear it, and we will break at that time. So I'll talk about breaks a little bit later as well. So I encourage people to mute themselves when they're not presenting, and then also that during the discussion sessions, some people have internet issues, but for those people who don't have internet issues, I ask them to keep their camera and their mic on for discussion and engagement. And the reason being is it really encourages people to participate and to kind of have that cohort experience, that real life experience, if possible. Now there is the chat function. I encourage people to ask questions through that, but I also encourage people to ask questions through just taking them themselves off mute and just asking it personally. If I am flying solo, then I let people know that I won't be monitoring the chat because I'm just one person. I'm also facilitating the session. So I let them know sort of my expectations that I will check the chat at break and at the end of the session, and I will get to your questions, just to reassure learners a little bit more. Yeah, so that's kind of how I lay out things. If I have a co-host or I have an admin person, they can monitor the chat. That really works well when you do have that capacity. So this is a nice little introduction to me. This is my photo, and this is what I do. I like to add something a little bit personal about me. So you'll see that I'm a bread maker. A lot of people during the pandemic have started this new adventure, and so I just I want to put something in there that's relatable to a lot of the audience. I can for sure say that I can make you a no-knead bread, pretty plain and simple, whole wheat or white, but I'm not a sourdough expertise. So I'm not ready to be leveled up to that version of it yet. But
I'm with you, Fatima.
Thanks, Glenna.
I too am scared of sourdough.
Yeah, but I've made lots of other things with sourdough, like pancakes and fry bread and stuff like that. So you want to include something that's relatable to your audience to build that rapport, because it's that much more harder online when you don't have that face-to-face contact. Thanks, Glenna, for the reassurance.
Always happy to.
Great. So this is a great segue into goals and goals and the agenda. So figure out what your goals and agenda are, lay them right off the bat in your presentation. So I'll usually say, you know, these are the 5 things we're working towards, or 3 things, and that way learners will know what to expect. Kind of like I would put an agenda on the board, this is the same idea. And so that way, if there is something out in left field, I will usually ask someone to ask it in the chat and I will address it later, or approach me during the break. And that way it doesn't take any time from the actual session to be presented. So it kind of lays out clear expectations for everyone across the board. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of facilitating, is having an icebreaker. Now, unfortunately, in an online world, it's a little bit trickier to have this icebreaker, but there are ways to do it. So one of my simplest techniques to do it is just to have a question that's relatable to the topic that you're presenting. So for example, I present RESP training in the community. And so my icebreaker question generally is, when you were growing up, what was the one thing that you wanted to become? So that makes people think about when they were a child, what do they want to become, which is relatable to thinking about post-secondary education and to saving for post-secondary education, which we will eventually get to. But again, this time is about building rapport, kind of staying on topic, but really getting to know each other. So I've gotten answers from anything from someone wanted to be a firefly, to another person wanted to be a dinosaur, to someone wanted to be an astronaut, or whatever it was. So you kind of build that rapport within that group, if they know each other or not, regardless. So it's a good little technique to do. So I'm going to just transition into breaks and that second part of my presentation. So I like to provide breaks every 50 minutes. I will generally use a slide like this so learners are aware that this is kind of break time. And I'll embed it right into the workshop. For me, it's really important every 50 minutes to an hour, there's a 10-minute break, just to give learners a reprieve from looking at the online screen there. And I also like to provide a visual representation of the break. So I will share my screen just like I am right now. I'll load this into my browser. You can see where it is on the internet. It's a free tool, and you can actually set it for whatever time you want. This is just 10 minutes, and you can just start it and it will count down. What I like about this tool is it will count down. Learners can check back into their screen and see how much time is left if they grabbed a coffee and weren't sure or something like that. But then also, when it gets to 0, it has actually an audible ring for everybody. So that means it goes off, and then everybody is called back to their computers. So you don't have to be waiting for learners to come back. So I feel like this is a really effective tool, and it's really worked. And other people from my workshops have actually taken this tool and used it in their own meetings and sessions. So I encourage you to do that. So in terms of having discussions and providing that specific element to your delivery, which is so important, there's a few ways to engage learners. There are breakout rooms, there are chats, and then there are polls, and then there are actual large group discussions that I'll get to next. So I encourage people to use all of them if they can. If you have that, use them to the fullest of your ability. So let's engage in a small activity. I want everyone to do this together. So for online delivery, what is your biggest challenge? I want you to just reflect on it, and I will keep a few seconds timer here. Okay, now I want you to write down what your biggest challenge is, please. And now if a few people could just volunteer in the chat and write down what they wrote down on their pieces of paper or whatnot of what their biggest challenge is, and then Glenna can share a few.
Oh, we've got some good ones coming in already. Thank you, everyone. We have a couple, we have 2 or 3 people talking about technology access or technology breaking down. And we have a couple of people talking about keeping people engaged, making it interactive. And someone, oh, we've got several more coming in. This is wonderful. Conversational flow, someone's mentioning. How do we manage that? One more, I'll pick one more, using a whiteboard. Oh, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. I think we will collect these after and include them as part of the slides when we send back those materials afterwards. Thank you, everyone. Keep those responses coming.
Thanks, Glenna. So I did this activity and I don't have an answer for you today, but the idea was the activity. So this technique is called the reflect, write, and share method. And so what it is that you give 1 minute for reflecting, 1 minute for the learner to write their responses down, and 1 minute for sharing. So usually, you know, when we're doing this in the workshop, I'll give a few minutes to each section. I just won't give 1 minute. For the sanctity of time, I've shortened it down, but you get the example. This is a key way during workshops that I actually have learners engage, because when they have something that they've reflected and written down, it's much easier to get over that virtual stumbling block of just sharing that idea. So lots of people find it daunting to write something down in a chat box and share it with the whole universe. And so this is a key way that I've had really great, fruitful discussions during my sessions. And so I encourage you to try it out and adapt it as you please. Now, one of the other things is that in person, a rule of thumb is you wait 7 seconds until you let the other person answer. So have a bit of silence, embrace it, it's okay. Online, I find the rule of thumb is to wait at least 12 seconds. So when you're counting seconds, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, that kind of thing. So it's really important to do that. And then the last thing is that I just want to go back a slide, but you'll notice that my question is in another color. This is a cue for the facilitator. It's also a cue for the participants that this is a more of an activity-based than all the other slides, which were information-based. So it's a nice little subtle cue. There's 2 approaches to delivering material online. There's the traditional and flipped classroom approach. So first of all, traditional is basically they come to the session, they got all the information at the session, and then they walk away with some activities or something to do, and they might check back in with the facilitator later on. So that's one type of classroom learning online. And then there's a flipped approach, which is the complete opposite. So that's when you'll send out the information beforehand, and then they'll come to the session. When they come to the session is about interaction. So it's more about having discussions, it's about debates, brainstorming, taking polls, sharing ideas. It's related to the material, but it's activities around the material. So both have merits to each. So for example, when I'm looking at the traditional, when I'm disseminating RESP information, because it's information heavy, I usually do it in the traditional format. Versus I've had colleagues of mine who present credit, and what they do is they have a cohort, they send out the material beforehand, participants read it, and then when they come together for the classroom, it's more that engagement and interaction piece than actually learning all that information. So both of them have their merits. It just depends on what you're actually presenting, what works, and I encourage you to play around with this a little bit. So, doesn't everybody love paperwork? So, you know, this is just one of these things that even I think if we were reincarnated as cats, we would still have paperwork to do. And so what I'm saying here is that it's okay. And also that, you know, give the reason why you have paperwork. So a lot of online workshops these days, they're free and available. People don't have to register. They don't have to do evaluation forms, none of that paperwork. Well, tell people why. So for example, at Momentum, when I start off the workshop, I say, hey, we're a nonprofit agency. Just so you know, we have funders and stakeholders who like to see the good work we're doing. And so that's why registration forms are so important. And so are the evaluations for the session. So that's really bringing that accountability piece to that forefront. I do it right at the beginning and right at the end. So I always hold about 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning and at the end for learners to actually physically fill out that registration form. Now at Momentum, we use Microsoft Forms. We found it easy and just to send out the link. So I send it out at registration. I send it out at the beginning of the class, and at the end of the class, I'll put it in the thing and in the chat box. And also the last part is I also add value. So for example, you know, if they fill out the registration form, what are they going to get out from it? So the number one thing is that after the lecture, I will follow up with additional resources and additional supports. So I will give them all the materials if they filled out the registration form and I have their email address, right? So that's just adding a bit of value, and that's more incentive for them to fill out that bit of paperwork. So making forms accessible online, and of course, allocating time during the workshop really makes it easier so that you don't have to go chasing after people for all of this paperwork. So that's just pretty much for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. That was a wonderful tour of so much of the great work that you're doing, and I can tell that you've learned a lot of this through doing it, which really comes through. And thank you very much for sharing all that with us. We're going to make sure that I know you have another handout that you're hoping to share with us as well, and so we're going to make sure that we get that to everyone as well at the end of the session. So thank you. I'm going to turn things over now to our second presenter, Millie Acuna, who is coming to us live from the wonderful city of Winnipeg, and she is going to likewise share a bunch of her tips. Some will be similar, some will be different, some will be, you know, out of this world. So thank you very much, Millie, and we're going to turn things over to you.
Great, thank you. I want to confirm that you're able to see my presentation view.
We can't see your presentation view right now. We can see that you're connected to GoToWebinar right now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem. There we go. Now we can see.
Excellent. Well, hello, everybody, live from Winnipeg. I am so happy to be here. Honestly, knowing that there are potentially over 200 facilitators watching, I mean, how intimidating is that? But also the fact that there are 200 of you out there who are passionate and committed to delivering financial empowerment virtually is, I think this calls for a forum or some sort of conference, because I feel like I'd love to continue talking about this.
I think you're right. I think you're right, Millie. We're going to have to come up with some more ideas. The one hour session is not enough.
Exactly. So I'm going to do my best here to share with you the work that we've done here at Seed Winnipeg. And here we go, virtual and beyond. So classroom dynamics. Now, I'm probably going to share a couple of things that Fatima already had mentioned, but there are some differences in terms of the logistics. And again, I want to echo what Glenna mentioned in terms of your own personal capacity, meeting your participants where they're at. And so this is simply a sharing opportunity, and I hope it inspires you to do the work there the way that you can. Yeah. So typically in an in-person delivery, Seed's workshops are 2 hours long, and this was really difficult to try and think about ways to prevent screen fatigue. Now, can we actually deliver a 2-hour workshop over a 1-hour virtual class? And that was something really tricky that a lot of the program coordinators were like, are we going to be able to meet our objectives? And then we realized that we can cover a lot of the core content, but also that we can continue to retain participants and build relationships even outside the virtual classroom. And so part of what Seed's doing are one-to-one sessions with the facilitator. So looking at content over the hour and then allowing participants, it's not mandatory, but allowing participants to speak to us after the classroom or another day to debrief about the content and ask deeper questions. And so we're going to go into that a little bit deeper, what that looks like, but because I already feel like there's some questions about capacity there. We're going to talk about breakout rooms, interactive apps, and whiteboard. I will share some examples later on, but it was brilliant to see that a lot of you are looking at ways of engaging participants, and I'm excited to share what those look like. And the objectives of SEED's classes, and I believe most of, probably all of you, is looking at strength-based training. And I thought that was a big fear of ours, that we were going to miss out on that opportunity to share stories. You know, is this more of a facilitator speaking to, or are we able to get groups to talk to us and share their stories? And so I'm happy to share that there are group activities that can still be fun virtually, and you can engage in storytelling. So the participant experience, one thing I'd like to mention here is, as much as we had hoped, we thought, oh, the possibilities of actually having 50 or 100 participants, I mean, that was exciting. But realistically, to have a successful, engaging time, we had actually capped our participant size to 10 to 12 participants per class. We do not ask for mandatory cameras on. In fact, this is the part where we empower. We empower participants to make that decision on whether they're comfortable having their cameras on. And when the title of my presentation says virtual and beyond, I have to say that we are, you know, in a very critical time. Folks want to learn money management. If they want to take me grocery shopping, or if they have to get some gas or run some errands while they take this class, which has happened. You know, they're taking the class over their cell phone, and I can see them grocery shopping while trying to learn money management training skills. As mentioned, Fatima also said mute unless, so we do ask everyone to mute themselves to prevent background noise. And ultimately, it is just an encouragement to speak up and unmute when necessary. Here's a new skill, though, chat room extraordinaire. Now, Fatima had mentioned that she will announce that she is not able to look at the chat room, because that is definitely fair enough. We are not able to, depending on class size and how long the course is. But you'll find through time that part of the engagement is actually reflecting in that chat room live. And that's a skill set that comes through practice and time. I found that I just naturally have been able to deliver and respond to chat sort of, at the same time, because it is live conversation. And so, but if you're having a difficult time balancing that, in the next slide, you'll get some tips in regards to capacity. And then my owl, I did want to show that was literally my face at the beginning of this pandemic, and going, what are we going to do to reach out to participants? Now, it is unfortunate that there are members of my community that do not have access to technology. And I wish I had a simple answer. But at this point in time, we were looking for apps that were user-friendly and ultimately accessible and free for participants. And so for some of you who are interested in knowing what SEED's platform is, we did start with Google Meet because that was the easiest accessible, cost-friendly version, and it wasn't a busy screen. So for those folks who are starting to plan delivery, I would highly suggest Google Meet, because it was a very simple sort of starter platform. And once you get familiar, for the folks who had mentioned how to use whiteboard, I was missing that too. So I would actually reflect back to Zoom now that their privacy and security has improved. The whiteboard through the Zoom platform is amazing and interactive. Okay, so Fatima had mentioned also all the paperwork and the evaluation tools that we have to do when we deliver these classes, our reporting requirements. And so one thing I wanted to mention is that we've added an extra slot for a meet and greet session. So I should actually step back a little bit and let you know that I'm speaking from a series of workshops primarily. So these workshops are participants that return on a weekly basis. And so a meet and greet session is at the start, which really irons out all of the technology fear. You know, whether or not participants are able to access the session, whether you're able to access and your PowerPoint is ready. You want to also gauge participant comfort level. You know, see where they're at. You know, are they comfortable with their cameras off? Are they primarily off and muted for the majority of the class? And then it's an opportunity to actually give a virtual tour of the platform that you've decided to deliver on. And really that's so that you can meet everyone's capacity, what level they're coming into online delivery. Introductions for a class of 12 is fun. I'm going to skip over, and that's generally where I meet the housekeeping rules about attendance and being respectful of, you know, what is said in virtual platform remains in space. Also, the icebreaker. So you'll see a photo of me. This is my icebreaker for meet and greets. Now, you might have heard of the term, what is your spirit animal? Well, I kind of, you know, turned that over and said, what is your money animal? What animal would best describe your money management skills? And I'm a terrible artist, but it usually gets folks laughing. And the goal of this, when I start drawing, is indicating how diverse we are, our different experiences with money. And it's fun. You know, people start to engage in that question and go, yeah, I'm a bird, because I sort of scavenge and then I don't know what to do next before income comes in. Or I'm a bear. That's the bear, by the way, that where my hand is. And I hibernate, I save, and then I spend all at once in the summertime. Yeah, and
That's
so
almost, Millie, it occurs to me that's almost like a money Patronus, in
yeah,
fact, if there's Harry Potter fans out there, because Patronuses are animals, right?
exactly. So, and if I had the whiteboard, actually, I would be
Mhm.
asking participants to draw their own animals, and it is super
Oh
fun.
gosh, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, the icebreaker is really important here in the meet and greet, but also it just gets the blood flowing. And the point of that icebreaker is to, again, welcome everyone from all experience, from all skill levels, and that we're starting this journey together. And then, of course, setting the tone in terms of personal goals as facilitators. We want to know, you know, what direction and what questions we want to answer, and so establishing that at the meet and greet. All right. So I was trying to figure out a way to describe how super we are as facilitators. Honestly, as online facilitator skills, we have to be virtual astronauts. And the first point here is our comfort in speaking to space. If anything, my fellow seedlings here always say, I don't know, I'm sweating buckets, no one's responding. And those 7 or 12 seconds that Fatima had mentioned can feel like forever. And so I've actually started humming about, you know, here's a question, get it through. And I'm like, and that was just a natural reaction of mine. But you know what? It's one of those things that it's a comfort. Through time and practice, you'll actually start to enjoy those awkward silences, to be honest. And then, like in-person delivery, by the time you reach class 3 or 4, you're going to find folks opening up. And you can start either calling out, hey, Glenna, how do you feel about this? And that silence is minimal. Prepping is essential. Technology is unpredictable. I can assure you that even myself, when I was 100, 200% comfortable with my prep, something still happened. So as much as I can say you can prep, just, you know, laugh at yourself. That's the only human thing we could do, and just work at it. So this is the astronaut skill that I'm speaking to. So speaking, navigating through different screens, and chatting through the chat box. Again, comfort level here. You can start with a facilitator, but here's a tip. At the very start of this online delivery, I had asked for a co-facilitator or an admin coordinator to help, because I really wanted to focus on delivering properly and engaging questions, but didn't want to focus on that chat room because I wasn't sure what that was going to look like. So for those first timers, I would actually say, see if you can have a wing person next to you, and they can be your wing person in terms of engaging conversation in the chat room while the facilitator is focused on the delivery. And really, at the end of the day, when it comes to delivery, just have fun with your passion. Talk about yourself and your stories. Talk about former participants. Just even laugh at yourself in terms of how crazy is this? It's just not normal. Like, all that empathy and rapport building will come naturally as you do it in person, and it goes a long way. Those one-to-one sessions with facilitators. So the piece that I want to encourage is that relationship building, that we might lose that connection with online delivery. And with one-to-one connection, the retention is higher. And so meeting the different levels of capacity with the participants, whether they're shy and they're not able to engage online, it's a safe space. So this is something I highly recommend if you have the time and capacity. And in these one-on-one sessions, we can do a deeper dive in creating a personal budget, sort of more discussions about credit and debt management and savings and investing. And also with the help of my admin coordinator or a co-facilitator, we can help people walk through the forms and evaluation tools, either fillable, or if they ask for it to be sent via email or by mail, we're being very flexible, meeting the needs of the participants. So the fund tools, the folks that are thinking, how do we engage? This is a quick list of some of the tools I use. And the one that I wanted to share with you today is Mentimeter. And other examples are YouTube, Jeopardy template. There's a really good one out there. If you're interested, let Glenna know and I'll share it with you. Also, giving yourself a break. Why don't you get some guest speakers to sort of stir the pot? That's always fun in terms of building capacity, partnership work. And then the awesome site that, by the way, Glenna has provided in terms of handouts, a lot of wonderful links that already exist out there from the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. Okay, so I'm going to try something tricky here virtually. Let's try it. I'd like you all, if you have the capacity, to sign on to www.menti.com and access and enter the code 9455146. And the page is going to look like this. Glenna, can you confirm that you can see the Mentimeter?
I can, yes.
Excellent. So this is
And
what
I
it would look
tried the
like.
code and the code works.
Excellent. So as a presenter, I would start with this. There's a nice question about what do you enjoy most about the fall season? And as soon as I have folks log in, I'm going to hide this now. Your answers will start creating a word cloud, a nice visual. Woo-hoo, I love this. I always get excited to see how big this cloud can get. I can't take credit for finding this. In fact, it was one of my partner sites that shared this tool, but I fell in love with it quite quickly. Ooh, pumpkin pie. Ooh, I love it. Sweaters and leaves. And it's just, I don't know, it's so simple yet engaging and fun. And it
This
really
is
sets
great.
the tone.
I could look at this picture all day. It's very soothing.
It is soothing. And often what I do, if I do something more relatable to money management, in fact, if it was goals or communication skills, I would actually print this out and send it to the team and send it to the class as a reminder. Now I'm conscious of the time, so I'm actually going to stop there, Glenna.
That's
And
great. Thank you.
yeah, and I wanted to say thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Millie. This has been wonderful. You know, speaking of having guest speakers, both you and Fatima have been wonderful guest speakers to share your exciting knowledge and all your great tips.
Yeah.
I'm going to be that person and take presenter control back so I can close us out here. But we are going to take a few minutes for questions. And oh, there's my desktop here. You can catch me. Well, I'm gonna make sure to include your last closing slide there, Millie, because kitty cats are wonderful. And I know you also want to share the FCAC tools there. And as you say, we don't have quite as much time to get into all of it, but as Millie mentioned, we do have a handout there. We have a couple of handouts there. One of them lists different online financial tools that if you'd like to use them live or asynchronously with your participants, they're great. And we also have a handout there listing different types of engagement tools that are also virtual. So Mentimeter is one of them. There's different types of whiteboard activities, polls, brainstorming. There's all manner of engagement tools. So we hope you'll be able to have a look at those later and get some great ideas. So we'd love, oh, and Millie, we have someone asking about the Jeopardy template. So if you have a link to that you can share with us later, we can include it in the slides.
Awesome, will do.
So I'm going to take a couple of questions here, and we've got a few coming in. And of course, Fatima, you got everybody thinking about what their different challenges and ideas are to, to continue with this work. So I'm going to pull from a few. We have someone asking about how to keep, like, how can you read body language? Or if you can't read body language, how do you work with that if that's something that you're used to using as part of your engagement work? Would Millie, you're fresh, having just finished speaking, so I'm gonna go to you first,
That
and
sounds
then
good.
I'll ask Fatima. Yeah.
Yeah, especially it's a challenge because we do ask, they decide whether to keep their cameras on and off, right? And so
Mhm.
if they do have their cameras on, you can tell whether they're present or not, as mentioned, grocery shopping, getting
Yeah.
gas, or even children in the background.
Mhm.
And I just basically I'm sensitive to that, you know, based on situation. I'm just
Mhm.
grateful that they're committed and attending the class. But
Yeah.
this is where it's critical with those one-to-one sessions, is
Mm.
that's where the value really comes forward.
Mm.
And you can engage on whether or not they really are enjoying the online, and they're very
Mhm.
honest whether it
Yeah.
is. And then you could do a deeper dive. So it is very hard to tell, but at the end of
Mhm.
the day, you push through that workshop and then follow up one-on-one.
Mm. Great. Fatima, do you have thoughts on that about when you can't work with body language necessarily?
If their camera is on and their mic is on or not,
Mm.
usually you can tell if they're looking right into the screen. So
Yeah.
you can tell if they're paying attention to the slides or what you're presenting, or you've lost some of your learners.
Yeah.
During the discussion engagement piece, you'll see them interact with each other. So that's a really useful aspect of it. But also,
Mhm.
like, like Millie said, they can always approach you afterwards, and you can always
Yeah.
check in one-to-one, and that's really important, that follow-up piece.
Oh, great. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Well, Fatima, I'll put this one to you next, and then Millie. What about when things are quiet? And Millie, I know you talked about some tips for silences, but what if you need to probe to see if they're there? What kinds of follow-ups or other sort of ways would you work with the quiet moments? Fatima, do you have thoughts on that?
So sometimes if I'm working with a cohort and I know that they're a little bit of a more of a quiet group, I'll actually engage the breakout rooms feature in the various technologies that we have. I'll use the whiteboard feature. Microsoft Teams, Zoom, they all have a whiteboard feature where you can put Post-it notes or something like that and engage with each other. So it doesn't have to be facilitator led, it can be classroom led. And I also I kind of try a few different methods in that sense.
Okay, great. Millie, did you have any other thoughts to add there?
Yeah, it's the encouragement of using the chat room is the
Yeah.
option. If you're feeling shy about speaking up online, it would be, okay, no problem. If anyone is interested in putting their comments or questions in the chat, feel free to do so, and then we'll move on. Yeah.
But one thing I had to add is that if I have a particularly shy group, I might just prep the questions beforehand and send them out in an email before, so the learners kind of know what to expect.
Yeah, that's great. And personally, I definitely ring more as an introverted person, even though I do a good extrovert when I'm speaking out loud to groups like this. So I love receiving things like that in advance. So that's a wonderful tip.
Yeah, and if you wanted to get more comfortable with the silence, until then, you can have a wing person to help you
Yeah.
out, engage, and start initiating that conversation.
Great. Yeah, different voices, different apps to pivot to. We had a question, maybe I'll go to you, Millie, first, and then Fatima, about what age groups you typically work with and how do you engage, like are there differences in how you engage depending on what age they are?
I love that question. All right, yes. So I've actually had to deliver to a group of 8 to 12-year-olds. That's as
Oh,
young
wow.
as I've had to deliver to, and all the way up to adult age. And
Mm.
so for the younger versions, I would say we were at most 45 minutes. And I had a lot of video embedded visuals and pictures and really questions for them to talk about their personal experiences to make it really relatable. And whereas the more older groups, and even newcomer and indigenous, I want to say that we do want to meet them with culturally and with translation. So it does impact the logistics of it. So if a translation is required, that's different. You can't cover that in an hour for sure.
Right, right.
And then thinking about the connectivity with First Nation communities. So you have to think creatively in terms of using YouTube, if that's something they could watch online, pre-recorded. And so, yeah, that is my experience with different age groups. Yeah.
Fatima, what do you think about different ages? What ages is there a normal age group for you that you work with?
Really anyone 16 and beyond. So kind of like that youth adult kind of group. To me, if I have a younger group, I'll engage with technology more. So for example, you know, I'll probably assume a little bit that they are more tech savvy and they have, you know, a phone that has those capabilities. So for example, you know, that tool that Millie showed, the menti.com, that's a great way to engage with young learners, right? And also having various clips or whatever to share. I also find shortening the material. So for example, you know, I might present budgeting in a full session workshop in person to be 2 hours. But when I bring it online, I call it something like budgeting light. And I let participants know that's 1 hour. And that's because it's just a capacity issue in terms of it's just going to be too overwhelming to have a 2-hour session. So knowing that about transitioning online is really important in whatever audience you're dealing with.
Great. Yeah, that's such a good point. Different transitions, different ways to manage the attention span, I guess. We have a question about managing difficult conversations, if those come up between participants or just generally in the session. Fatima, I'll ask you first this time, and then Millie. Is that the type difficult conversations? Is that something you have to deal with sometimes in your workshops? Do you have any tips on managing those?
Generally speaking, I haven't had to deal with those.
Okay.
But if there is a sensitive topic, I would highly recommend sort of sending a little bit of pre-work out before the participants get to your online workshop, because that preps them a little bit and lets them anticipate what's going to come, so that they're not caught off guard and they're ready to think about and be in that mindset and maybe have that openness to have that conversation.
I've personally called it out myself. Just name it. Let's agree to disagree. I like to validate opinions, so I will say I can see both perspectives. And for the sake of the group, I would invite you both to connect with me individually, and we can continue the topic. Sort of setting the stage with, yep, I think it's important. I see your perspective. Let's move on with the class, and you and I can continue this conversation afterwards.
That's great. Yeah, that's a really good point. Sometimes if you make it visible, then it's less scary, and you can find a way to manage and develop some offline strategy to work on that.
And just making sure that you validate their feelings, because if it's something that they've escalated to the point where it's really conflicting between other people in the class, you don't want to dismiss that. You want to know, yes, I hear you, I feel you. Let's agree to disagree at this point and move on, and we can talk about this further afterwards. Yeah.
That's great. We have so many questions that have come in, and I'm going to see if we can have maybe Millie or Fatima, if you're interested to engage with a couple of these after. We could always provide some written notes, but it's been wonderful to see these questions come in, and I can tell that as Millie said, there's lots of interest in this topic. So we're so gratified to have had you with us today and to know that there's such keen interest. It sounds like there's interest in this topic from many different sides. So there's questions around how do we use technology, how do we engage with learners, how do we manage different population groups or ages or different geographies. So we hear you, and we are so glad that you've been with us, and we're going to work on what more resources and what more connections we can make to support your learning in this area, because we are certainly all continuing to learn more as this remote work and remote learning life continues. So we want to thank you again for joining us. We will be making sure you have access to all the materials from today, and the recording as well as the slides will be posted on our Learning Hub. We'd love to encourage you to find our Learning Hub if you haven't seen it already. We have lots more resources, toolkits, a searchable library of resources. All manner of financial empowerment stuff can be found there. And please keep in touch. We have, oh, I'm going to apologize. I have the wrong names in the end there. I'm so sorry, everyone. But our website and email are correct there. We would love to keep in touch. Please sign up for our newsletter, and we'll be happy to let you know when we have more events like this coming up. So thank you again. We know your time is valuable, and we're so glad you spent it with us. So have a wonderful day.